rattiest city in America.
Now, one local group is trying to fix the problem by sending another furry friend out to patrol the city streets.
They called it the dumbest idea Los Angeles ever had: release hundreds of cats to deal with rats. And the internet did what the internet does, laughed Hollywood logic, feline task force, memes before sunrise, jokes before facts. But under the laughter, the alleys still twitched. You still kicked a bin before rolling it.
Generally eat a lot of rats. They will kill some rats, usually in the beginning when they first arrive at a new location. But typically they're actually just deterring them with their pheromones. That's enough to actually keep the rats away.
Still heard the scratch behind drywall and pretended it was nothing. That's the real city soundtrack. Soft, constant, everywhere. Not loud, just present. Like worry. Like whiskers. So the fix began low and quiet. No speeches, no ribbon cutting, just movement in the dark, learning how to read a city that never sleeps. Because if the trouble walks on paws, maybe the answer has to as well. A daily city with a nightly tax. Cities run on repetition. The truck beeping in reverse. The cart rolling to the curb. The side door propped open because the lunchtime rush refuses to be patient. In that repetition, rats found their opportunity. A lid left ajar for just a second became a standing invitation. A drain that smelled like last night's oil became a perfect corridor. An alley that stayed dark became a runway. The problem was not theatrical. It was routine. It was the cost of 1,000 small lapses multiplied across a grid of homes, schools, markets, and warehouses. Poisons were the loud answer, and they failed in ways that mattered. They killed what they touched and what they did not intend to touch. A hawk that took a poisoned body. An owl that never learned to hunt again. A pet gone quiet. The bill never balanced. It only changed who paid. Traps collected evidence, not peace. People grew used to banging lids and pretending that the sound of courage was the sound of control. It was not. It was the sound of a city losing the grammar that keeps behavior readable. Rats memorize us. That was the lesson. They memorize our trash hours, our shortcuts, our 5-minute gaps. They respond to permission faster than we respond to policy. If the problem lived on the ground, perhaps the sentence needed to be written where sentences begin. Poison silences nothing for long. To change a city's rhythm, you need pressure from above. A rule written in flight that makes daylight boldness suddenly feel expensive. Why eagles and why now? A predator is a summary of a food web. When the watcher disappears, the bold get bolder. Los Angeles had a skyline with empty lanes. Few big silhouettes, fewer reasons for daytime restraint. Rats sprinted at noon because nothing above disagreed. The plan did not try to scare them with noise. It tried to introduce a rule that did not need a siren. Eagles were not a stunt in feathers. They were pressure in the right place. Why eagles and not poison again? Because poison leaves a dead zone. Because collateral damage erases trust. Because the city's ledger was full of invisible costs. Raptors found on the edge of a lot. Pets in emergency rooms, water that carried a problem downstream. Eagles offered a different contract. Risk felt different when written by a shadow at altitude. Routes shortened. Runs shifted to safer hours. Behavior bent toward caution. You could change a habit with a headline. You could keep it changed with a silhouette. Why eagles and not cats, not traps, not glue? Because day needed a day shift. Because the places where people live and work needed a cue that arrived with the sun. Because the goal was not carnage, it was choreography. Eagles do not have to strike constantly to write a law of motion. They only have to exist predictably enough that the ground learns to whisper again. Eagles don't appear by wish, they require design. Before feathers filled the air, maps, towers, and thermals had to align so wildness could thrive without supervision. Could your city pull this off? Comment what you'd fix first. Like if design over destruction makes sense to you. And subscribe to follow how wild ideas quietly save urban life. Building a sky that works. You do not dump birds and hope. You build a sky. That started with a map. Corridors were traced along rivers, reservoir rims, and freight-torn alleys. The math included wind and heat, thermals that rise along glass and concrete. When the day grows warm, alleys that channel air in predictable ways. Towers that make small weather eagles were raised to strength without being taught to love us. Food arrived invisibly. Doors opened to thermals, not hallways. Their first step into air was a choice that mattered. Choice keeps wildness wild. Nest boxes faced the right way, so afternoon wind would not bully them. Perches were placed where sight lines helped a bird read a block. Juveniles watched a city from above before deciding to own parts of it. They learned the line where heat rises between asphalt and river. They learned how gulls traced edges of lift, and where pigeons circled for food. The skyline turned into a textbook. The lesson ended when the lesson worked. Eagles were not employees, they were residents. On the ground, the rhyme had to match. Locking lids, shifting pickup schedules, lighting alleys that stayed dark too long. A sky that says occupied only works if the ground says closed for boldness. The plan did both. The message became consistent at scale. Once the watchers returned, the mistakes glowed. Every lid ajar, every bin unlatched, every careless gap became a signal. The city could finally see its own habits. What permission looks like? Permission smells like peanut oil on a delivery route. It tastes like a wrapper under a bench. It looks like a lid propped because a broom is not close enough. It sounds like the quiet tap inside a wall no one wants to open. Permission colonizes expectations. People say they are everywhere and forget to ask why. The answer is never mysticism. It is maintenance. Eagles revised permission without a speech. Their shadow moved across a lot, and a whisker twitched. A route across a bright patch felt expensive. A risky dash at noon became a bad investment. Where rats once crossed a parking lot like they owned it, they now hugged the seam between wall and shadow. The open space they used to run like a shortcut across your shoes lost its vacancy. It felt supervised. Permission removed, pressure added. That was the equation. Without pressure, the neatest plan on paper remains paper. With pressure, the same bins, the same routes, the same alleys start telling a different story. Change begins quieter than critics prefer. Shadows crossed, whiskers paused, and people wondered if it worked. The only proof worth having was time itself passing. The first season of Doubt. The first drops did not arrive as hero shots. They looked like a wobble, a catch, a glide to a light pole above a strip mall. No golden scissors, no drone footage that made you cry. Just a darker shape on a power line, changing the mood of a well-worn route. People looked up and did not know what they were seeing yet. They only knew a block felt different. A whisker tested air and retreated. A lid rattled and stilled. A worker paused with a hand on a handle and then kept moving. Technicians tracked pings. A river corridor here. A wholesale district there. The edge of a reservoir, learning late thermals. The job felt like carpentry after a storm. Brace this, patch that, leave when it can stand. No one was writing a screenplay. They were writing a system that did not care whether it was beautiful. They wanted ordinary to return. The jokes did not stop. Then came the numbers and the silence, the metrics matching the mood. Calls dipped, nerves eased, and for once, quiet meant progress instead of decay, proof you can feel and count. A banded bird from a river tower showed up near the loading docks. 4 weeks later, another took a freeway verge no one predicted. One learned the late thermals over a reservoir and began a loop that chopped a rat's noon route into pieces. Complaints dipped, where silhouettes grew routine. The silence of a block changed shape. Fewer startled yelps. Fewer broom handles banging lids. Fewer phones held up to record a tale that should not be that bold at that hour. The city did not feel safer because of a press release. It felt safer because of a pattern. Proof in a city is not one number. It is a rhyme among many. Sanitation calls down. Power outages linked to gnawing down. School custodians reporting fewer sightings in the lunch hour. Grocery managers ordering fewer traps. Apartment managers not replacing weather stripping every other week. The rhyme says, enough watchers overhead, in a language drawn from maintenance logs and inventories. When multiple corridors went quiet, in the same season, neighborhoods dropped their shoulders an inch. People stayed out a little longer. The block felt watched, without feeling watched by each other. The repair did not ask for applause. It asked for participation. Close the lid. Do not prop it. For just a second. Light the alley. Call in the dump. No miracle sustains itself. Behind each calm alley stood someone mending, counting, teaching. Real order is human. Ladders, gloves, notebooks, patience, and hands that never stopped. The hands that made it hold. Behind every dot on the map is a person who knows the rattle of a bin lid in crosswind. A driver who times a delivery past dawn to avoid a pattern that taught the wrong lesson. A climber who can look at a pole and see the safe route, and the foolish one who knows a nest box must face a certain direction, or a thermal will bully it all afternoon. A veterinarian with a hand like a metronome for a chick's breathing, who can tell by the weight if a bird is more muscle than hope. A teacher who turns a camera feed into a lesson about corridors and tags. A neighbor who stops propping the lid with a broom handle because a flyer explained why just a second becomes dinner. There are maintenance crews who learn that moving slowly on a ladder is the fastest speed when trust is at stake. There are analysts who stare at spreadsheets until a corridor reveals itself. There are residents who become observers without becoming pests, who learn that watching is not touching. There are children who learn to name a band color and a silhouette. They will carry that knowledge into the kind of adulthood that helps cities last. The glamour of a raptor's flight is not the work. The work is the quiet stubbornness of people who refuse to stop caring. Every success attracts doubt. The questions came, but so did answers. Data, design, and persistence. The plan adjusted, not collapsed. Systems prove themselves by surviving questions. The arguments, everyone predicts. They will just move the problem. This is theater. What about other animals? The criticisms came on schedule. Critics have schedules too. The answers were not defensive. They were clear. Rats behave like water. They find the path of least resistance. When the queues stay tight, lids locked, alleys lit, waste timed, skies occupied, the path of least resistance becomes somewhere else, and sometime else that does not involve your lunch break or your child's field. Movement is not failure, it is reshaping. Concerns for other species mattered. The plan mapped bird-safe windows, timed releases to avoid migrations, and adjusted corridors when observation showed unintended pressure. The goal was hierarchy, not terror. Pressure, not panic. Influence, not annihilation. Balance is not a still photograph. It is a film that breathes. The city learned to breathe with it. The theater accusation did not survive the boredom. Because success was a technician writing checked tower, it is fine. Because success was a custodian erasing a note they had written daily for a year. Because success was a string of days where nothing happened that used to happen all the time. Then the extraordinary became ordinary again. Parks felt safe. Shops stayed quiet. Life continued without fear, which was precisely the point. Stability that no one needed to mention. Ordinary scenes that used to be impossible. A child sets a sandwich on a park bench while tying a shoe. Nothing visits in the next 20 seconds. That used to feel like a miracle. Now it feels like Tuesday afternoon. A deli owner stops keeping a broom by the back door because banging the lid at noon is no longer a daily ritual. He keeps the broom anyway. Habits fade slower than rules hold. A lineman goes an entire heat wave without a gnaw-related outage call in a neighborhood that used to pop something every other day. He calls it luck. he is half right. Luck that has been engineered is called design. A school custodian erases a note on a staff whiteboard. Check the planter before lunch. Erasing a sentence can feel like erasing a decade. It is also how a new decade starts. A delivery driver takes the alley again and realizes at the end that their shoulders did not climb toward their ears. A grandmother sends a message to a neighbor that says simply, "Come sit." Peace is not the absence of trouble. It is the presence of ordinary. Nothing perfect lasts without tending. Towers rust, storms strike, habits slip. The city learned that victory wasn't permanent. It was maintained, bolt by bolt, with steady attention. Costs, breaks, and honest edges. No plan is free. Towers need maintenance. Birds get injured. Conflicts happen at edges where a wild thing and a human thing want the same perch. Storms shear limbs that held good perches. A young bird misjudges a crosswind and needs a rescue. A festival leaves a corridor sloppy for a night. And permission sneaks back in. Honest work does not hide these truths. It budgets for them. Trade-offs are better than consequences. A call to an urban wildlife team at dusk is cheaper than a pattern of emergency calls at midnight from 3 blocks because the same fearless route kept succeeding. A bolt replaced on a tower is less expensive than a bakery's inventory after a line trips. The city learned to treat maintenance as victory rather than as evidence of flaw systems that work need tending. That tending is proof that someone intends to keep the system alive. The point is not to avoid setbacks, it is to keep them from becoming verdicts. Resilience is maintenance with manners. One night, people realized silence had meaning. It wasn't emptiness, it was function. The watchers worked, the streets listened, and peace finally sounded like maintenance done right, the silence that means something. When you change the sky, the ground responds. Not in poetry, in paw prints, in weight on a scale, in calls not made, in outages that never happen, in lids that do not rattle, in footsteps that do not hurry. You can measure it. You can also feel it in the way a block holds you. Silence in a city is not emptiness, it is order. It is the sound of a place remembering how to be itself without pretending nothing is wild. Predation is not punishment, it is punctuation. It makes the streets readable. It turns every bin is a buffet into that gap is not worth it at noon. It teaches a population to schedule itself into shadows again, which is where it belongs in an ecosystem that includes us without centering our mistakes. The goal was never softness. The goal was accuracy. Accuracy is less thrilling than crisis. That is why it wins. Silence used to signal neglect. Here it signals structure. The sky says occupied. The ground says closed for boldness. People say it is calmer now. With calm restored, the work continues. The sky stays occupied. The streets stay honest. And Los Angeles, once mocked, remembers that balance begins whenever someone finally looks up. The city that looked up and then forward. Evening now. A pair rises on a column of warm air and becomes, for a moment, the most important punctuation mark in the entire sky. Somewhere, a shop owner locks up, without checking the mop sink for movement. Somewhere, a student rewinds a clip and identifies a banded bird by sight for the first time. Somewhere, a technician logs a data point and smiles, because it means another checkbox marked normal. Below it all is a city that once laughed at a 6-word headline and then did something rarer. It learned. It stayed. It fixed what it could fix, one careful season at a time. This was never about spectacle. It was about citizens and crews deciding that design beats cynicism, that patience beats poison, that presence beats panic. It was about a city paying what it owed to its own streets, not with louder warnings, but with watchers overhead who made boldness expensive. It was about remembering that you cannot bait your way to balance. You can design toward it. What do you think? Should more cities turn to nature to fix what humans broke? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone. If this gave you a new perspective on urban wildlife, or made you rethink how cities can fight back smartly, give it a like. And subscribe for more stories where design, nature, and common sense come together in unexpected ways.